Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Testing 1, 2, 3. Is this on? I don't know. Maybe. Could be. Is it? Can you hear it at the back? Lovely. Then it must be on. A pleasure to have you here on this Kansas Day 2025. I want to identify the people who actually helped make this work and make it happen. The major sponsors of Kansas Day are the City of North Newton and the Newton Convention and Visitors Bureau. They're also sponsors at a different level, Citizens State Bank in Gossel, Union State Bank, Intrust Bank, Conrad Insurance Company, Bunting Magnetics, Jim and Sharon Means, GNC Farms, Sunny Slope Farms, Berkey Farms, Roofing Services Unlimited, and J.P. Wigan and Sons. It takes a wide variety of people interested in the Coffin Museum and in this particular day to make it happen. You're privileged here in just a bit to hear a presentation by Chris Smucker on unlocking your house's story. Here's the introduction. Chris Smucker has worked at the Harvey County Historical Museum and Archives as the archivist and curator for 18 years. She grew up on a farm east of Gossel and attended Bethel College. After graduating, she got her MA in American History from WSU. She has published one book entitled Heritage of Care, The History of Bethesda Hospital and Home. As part of her work, she researches and writes about many aspects of life in Harvey County. These stories are published on the museum's website on their blog, Voices of Harvey County. Special thanks goes to Roofing Services Unlimited for their sponsorship of this presentation. Please welcome to the podium, Chris Smucker.
Thank you. Can you hear me now in the back? Is that okay? Let me get my notes straightened out here. Houses have always fascinated me. As growing up as a kid, I actually lived from birth to 2 years old in the house my great-grandfather built, and then I moved to a house my great-great-grandfather built. And then when I was at Bethel, one of my research projects was houses in the Gossel area, so I did a lot of studying of the houses of the earliest houses there. And I also did some research on the Both Under Fast house, which is also my great-great-grandfather and grandmother's house. And the Krause house on the Mennonite Heritage and Agricultural Museum is also a house I researched. It is my great-grandfather's house. So houses have always been very interesting to me, especially the older ones, and I really like Victorian old houses. I have an old house. I live in an old house built probably, before 1890. So it's always interesting to wander around the house and wonder, why did they do this? And why did later people do this? And they'll probably wonder someday why I did some of the things I did. So about this photo, this is from the Harvey County, all these photos are from the Harvey County Historical Museum archives. This is a 3-story Queen Anne frame building with a large wraparound. And I guess I was telling someone I didn't know where it was, but I do. It's on it's the Winnie Olinger home in 1903. And the address at that time was 218 West Broadway. And I don't think it's still standing, but it's just would have been a wonderful house. So I'm not going to give you a step by step. I'm going to give you resources that you can look at. Everybody kind of develops their own style and things of how you do your research. So I want to just make you aware of where you can do your research. But this is the first tip I'm going to give you, and I think it's the most important tip. Always, always write down your sources. Like when you cut out a newspaper article, always write down what newspaper and what date, because you will not remember. Or if you copy a picture from somewhere, write down where you copied it from, because you will not remember. I've had to retrace my own steps enough times to know that you won't remember. So one of the places, that I like that's fun to look at is the Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps. They are available online at the Library of Commerce. It's www.loc.gov. But if you type in Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps, it should come up, and they are free. We also have them at the museum in paper copy and on microfilm. So you're welcome to come by, and we can help you find them on the internet too, or you can look at our paper or microfilm if you wish. But these are really interesting because they, the fire departments use these to know what buildings were made of and where they were and where the gas lines were, all that kind of stuff. So this is the first page for the 1884 one. The dates of them are 1884, 86, 1896, 1901, and 1909, and 1915. So you can kind of trace that way the history of a building. So recently I did a research project on these two buildings, 615 and 617 Main. Let's see if the pointer works here. Okay. So that's these two buildings right up there. And from this map, I can tell there were two buildings there in 1884. One of them was, I believe, brick or rock. I'd have to go back to my key. They're also, it's color coded. So red is usually brick, and I believe blue is rock, and then yellow is sort of wood. So it tells you what they were made of too, and it shows you the footprint of the building. And then if you go down to 1886, you can see if there were any changes made. Where that went to. In 1896, you can see that wooden building kind of changed shape a little bit, but the other building stayed. And sometimes, like they will tell you what the building was. Like it was originally a tobacco factory, I believe. And then in 1901, you can see major changes happened to those two structures. Well, at least to the one structure, it became a stone structure. So you could look at the newspapers then for that time period and see if they mention anything about a new business or anything about a building, which in this case they did. And then in 1909, you can see how it stayed relatively the same. But then in 1915, you can see major changes again in the footprint of the buildings. So it just kind of helps to trace the footprint. So you can do this for houses too, which we'll get to in just a minute, I guess. If you don't have Sanborn maps, because they only cover cities and usually just the basic part of cities, they don't cover, way out there, more populated ones. But if you live in the country, you're going to need the county plat maps or property ownership maps. And this happens to be one for where I live, in McPherson County, the Meridian Township. So I'm in section 36, somewhere over there. So the important thing about this is it also shows ownership, and in some of them it shows where a house might be. In the 1884 one, it shows orchards and schools and other interesting things that are around there. Some of the others are not quite as detailed as the 1884 one is. But the dates for the plat maps that we have that are older are 1884, 1902, 1918, and then we have one for 1931. But today you get them, they're the rural directory. They send them out to farmers or to people that own land in that county. Like we get one pretty much every year that shows ownership of land and stuff. So this is McPherson County. What's important here is if you're going to go to the courthouse and do some research, you need to know this information. The legal description, and also if you have at least the section number, you're fine. But it helps if you know which corner of the section it is and all that kind of information, because they're going to need to know that to find the information for you. I don't know, did I say that these are also available online through the Kansas State Historical Society? You go onto their webpage and you type in, well, I usually just type in plat maps and it comes up, and then you get a view where it says you have the alphabet and you pick your county, and then you can just look at the maps available for their county. And that brings me to, especially with the courthouse here in Harvey County, you need to make an appointment. They won't just take drop-ins. So when you go there, make an appointment, have all your information so you don't waste an appointment. It'll be fine, and they're very helpful then. At the museum, we don't require an appointment. You can drop in, but it is nice if you're, doing a major project, to let us know so we can kind of be thinking and maybe get some stuff out or know which direction you're going. We do not know the history of every house in Newton, despite what some people think, we do not. So it's helpful if you let us know, but if you don't and you forget, that's no big deal. We'll still help you. Then another resource that we have is tax rolls and newspapers, and that's newspapers. Well, I'll talk about tax rolls first. Those are only available at the museum, as far as I know. And those can be helpful, especially when you have dead spots in censuses and directories. Like we had, like in 1890, the census, there's no census because of a fire. But if you go to our tax rolls, or our voter rolls, and tax rolls. I'm talking about tax rolls right now. So disregard what I just said. I get those two mixed up. Tax rolls are just about the taxes. And they are a mess to work with. It's very tedious because they are not indexed. The tax rolls are not indexed. And you have to plow through the microfilm. So that is serious research that you have to just do if you want that. But it will show you, that will tell you when somebody added on to their house or made a big improvement or whatever. It kind of, if you're not finding what you need with the Sanborn maps or whatever, this could be another alternative, or if pictures aren't helping you out, this would be another way to do it. So can anybody guess where this house is? It's still standing. It's a fairly well-known house, actually. No? It's West Broadway. Would you recognize it then? This is the house on 303 West Broadway. So if you were looking at tax rolls, you would see that they made major changes in the house at whatever date they made those changes. I don't remember off the top of my head. That's also on the Sanborn maps, you would probably see a change in the footprint of the house. Then we go on to newspapers. Newspapers can give you a lot of strange information, a lot of helpful information. We have all the microfilm for newspapers. It's hit and miss during the 60s. We're trying to fill that in at the museum, but the earlier newspapers we have pretty solid. But there you have to kind of have an idea where you're looking, because it's not searchable. You just have to go through the microfilm. What is nice about newspapers on the Kansas State Historical site is that they are free to Kansas people. So I'm going to try and walk you through this because it's maybe somewhat confusing to some people. This is the Kansas State Historical site, and you can up there where it says Archives, you click over there, and you come to this very first screen here, or something similar. And then you click onto Digital Newspapers, and you'll get a screen that looks like the middle one. You click on the top one there, Newspapers, and you'll get a screen like the final one. And that's where you enter your driver's license information, and then you hit enter, and then you will have a choice of either Ancestry.com or newspapers.com. I don't know what happens if you hit Ancestry. You can try that, maybe that's helpful to you. But if you hit newspaper.com, it'll take you to newspaper.com, and that is free. I will caution you that it's just Kansas newspapers. It's also, the Newton papers are only on there up until 1922. And even if you get the full subscription to newspaper.com, I don't think additional Newton papers are on there. I could be wrong, they might have added them. So, but if you're researching, old stuff, it's then you type in your keyword, your search term, and let it do its work and see what comes up. I always tell people not to limit your options when you're doing keyword searches or search terms or whatever, or name searches, because people would sometimes be known as, say, Mr. C.S. Bowman, C. Bowman, just Bowman. His wife might be known as Mrs. C.S. Bowman, Mrs. Bowman, Mrs. C. Bowman, and you also might try different spellings. I found this out very recently when I was researching something for Gossel about this explosion that happened in 1916, the Bergen explosion, and I couldn't find it under B-E-R-G-E-N. It's because the newspaper was spelling it B-O-E-R-G-E-N. So they were spelling it wrong, but you had to keep, trying different ways to find something. So sometimes you have to just try different ways. So don't get, what I'm trying to say is don't get hung up on it has to be a certain way. Sometimes it might, you have to experiment. So newspapers can tell you a lot. Sometimes they're just a little blip that says so-and-so was wallpapering their house. Sometimes it'll give you a long description of a house that's being built. It just is hit and miss, but if it's a hit, then you've got a really good description of a house. You can also, if you're researching, I always research the people that lived there at the same time. It can give you clues as to what they did, who they were, that kind of thing. So it's always very helpful to do a newspaper search. Which brings me to city directories and censuses. We have the city directories back to 1885, and they're hit and miss on those early years. So it's like 1885, 87, 1902, 05, 1911, and then from then on it's kind of more consistent. But if you are looking for a person or a house, it's worthwhile looking at a city directory. So if you have a street address and you're wanting to know if it was there in 1885, you can do a crisscross. We had a volunteer that went through the 1885 and 87 city directories, and she made a crisscross. So you can search it by street names. Later directories do that automatically. You can look at the 1911 one, and in the publication itself, it has where you can look up by street address, not just name. Usually in the back, and just like find Main Street, and then it'll start with 100. We just go down the list. City directories are helpful because you'll get the name of the person, you might get their wife, sometimes you get children's names, you might get their occupation. This is especially the early ones. They're very helpful with that. At a certain period, they started labeling C for colored. Then they stopped that after a time. The very earliest ones they didn't, but then in the middle, they are. It's sort of strange. But so that also helps you know when you have two families named Anderson, one is a black family, one's a white family, that will help you know which family you're looking at, for one thing. And then you can go from there, and you can go to the Sanborn maps again and look at that address. You can go to the newspapers. Sometimes I just type in the address in the newspaper.com and see what comes up. I haven't lost anything but my time, so. And sometimes I hit really, interesting things. But, and then there's the census, which is also available online. We have it also at the museum, but you can, I use Family Search because it's free. You can just pull that up. They ask you to, I mean, you have to make an account, but it's all free. So you can just type in your name, and there again, you have to be kind of generous with names because they weren't always consistent with how they did the names. But that's also will tell you where people were, and it will help you understand if they're, if they were living at this address, who they were, and all that kind of thing. Because like I said, I always also research the person or the family that was living there, just because it helps give it context. Now let's talk about county voter rolls. That's what I was talking about earlier, that are very helpful when you are, and I see I have it spelled wrong, I'm sorry. When you're talking about, like there's gaps in the censuses, like 1890 especially, because that's when there was a fire. We have the voter rolls for 1890. So you can look in the voter rolls and you can see if they registered to vote. It will give their address, it will give their occupation a lot of times and their age. And it's indexed at the museum, so you can just come and do a quick index search. So I found that very useful. Photos are also helpful if you happen to have them. We have a photo archives that we had a volunteer that scanned thousands, up to probably 9,000, 10,000 photos. And some of those are of houses. She was very faithful about doing that and then identifying where they might be from. So when she got this photo, all it said on the back was Gladys Brewer, Heston Villa, Kansas, house across from the courthouse. That's all the information that was with the photo. So she did some research and discovered it was a house located at 821 North Main Street, where H.H. McAdams lived for 15 years. So it's presumably them. But also, so from there you could actually go back and research. You might actually find this house on the Sanborn maps because that's fairly close to town at a certain point. But this is also where you can talk about architectural style, which will help you date your house as well, because certain styles were more prevalent at certain times. I'm very old-fashioned, and I've had this book since I was in grad school. So, field guides to American architecture are always very helpful. I mean, it just gives you a guideline as to when these styles were popular, and that helps you maybe date a little bit. And I'll say most houses around here are probably what you would call Victorian vernacular. It means they have there's parts of a certain thing that somebody liked, and then there's parts of another particular feature. So we don't really have true Italianate. I mean, it has aspects of Italianate, just the general look of it, but it's not a true Italianate. Since we're talking about books here, I was going to say this is another book that I've had that I think I don't know if it's in print, but it's an excellent book if you're doing research on rural properties. It talks about the balloon framing, and he did work in Nebraska, but a lot of it applies to here. It talks about how the T-shape and then the I-shape, T-shape, and how the different parts of the house came together over time and that kind of thing, and how you can date those different parts. So if you get a chance, you see it at a used bookstore, I would pick this one up because I have found it very helpful and useful. Yeah, so on pictures you can, there's lots of clues. You can get an idea of what they valued. Like in rural photographs, a lot of times people pulled out furniture to take pictures with their furniture because they want to show off their furniture. So you get clues on that. Interior photos are somewhat hard to find and rare, but those are always fun to see how people decorated their house. We do have some, especially of Dr. Boyd's house. We have a lot of pictures of interior of that house, and they're fun to look at. And it's free to come to the museum and look at pictures anytime you want. If you just want to come look at pictures, they're on a computer. You can just flip through. It's no problem. We can also search for a specific, I won't say a specific address, but they're divided out by streets to a certain extent. I'm not saying we have every house, because we don't. We have a very limited amount, but it's worth a shot if you are willing to try. Yeah. Clues from the structure. I'm not necessarily an architectural historian, so I'm not going to say a whole lot of that, but you learn to know. I mean, when you're studying your house, you can tell if a door just looks kind of odd, that maybe is something that has been changed over time, or if all of a sudden the wood floor stops here and something else goes a different direction. I mean, there are just things that you can be aware of that you might then check out. Places that don't get refinished or fixed up, like closets and stairway to the cellar. That's a good place at my house, where you can see changes. Is a good idea. I mean, that's those good places to see, because people don't tend to paint over the stairway to their cellar. They just leave it because they don't see it. So you can see the different changes where they've added or taken away a lot more easily. So it's just a matter of observing and maybe reading and learning on the job, basically. But roof lines are also, you can look at roof lines. That helps a lot too. If something just is out of whack a little bit, that would be a good clue, as well as pictures. We also have historical surveys at the museum, and I find these cumbersome to use because the way they're organized is by blocks. But I think it was in 1998, her name escapes me. She went through,
Christy Davis?
Yes, Christy Davis, went through Newton and inventoried the houses. I think vast majority of them. And this is what they look like. On one page, it's just a form with a picture of the house. On the back, you have a drawing with the footprint of the house and maybe something about what was in the yard, how it was laid out. I mean, these can be helpful. She was doing them fast. There's not a whole lot of research, so a lot of it's kind of like, she had this field guidebook, so she was basing some of it on the general knowledge about when that particular style of house was in popularity. But it can give you an idea, a starting place. I also, when I was in grad school, I worked on one for West Branch Township in Marion County, which we took pictures of every building this is what they wanted. They wanted pictures of every building on every farmstead in West Branch Township. So that's what we did, no matter the condition. And so those are also at the Kansas State Historical Society. I'm not sure how available, and they've done this with other places. I think Menno Township has done, and I mean, there's other communities that have done this too. I don't know how available that is, if they have it online or not. They do. Brian Stubbe says they do. So that's another place to look. But you're welcome to come. There you need to know your block number. Like I said, I find them cumbersome to use. So, but they're there. You're welcome to use them. So this is my last tip here. Use the local resources you have. The Harvey County Historical Museum and Archives. We have all of these things that I've mentioned, and I've also tried to tell you when we have things that are available online, so you can do online research too. I personally like to use this Sanborn Maps online because remember the second where I told you about the buildings, I had cropped just the part that showed about those buildings. You can crop them and load them up to see better on your computer. It just is helpful. But we're always willing to assist you. Like I said, the more information you bring with you, the better we can help you. And it's free if you come into the museum to research, and we help you. We do charge us a fee if you call us and want us to do all the research. Then we have to charge something. The Newton Public Library also has newspapers on microfilm, so that would be another option if you can't get to the museum when they're open. And the Mennonite Library and Archives here on Bethel College campus also has lots of resources too. I don't know how much would pertain to houses, but that's another, depending on what you're researching, they would be another excellent resource right here. We're very fortunate to have good resources. So if you come, this is just information about our fees, which are on our website. I think we charge $45 for the first 3 hours and $50 for every hour or half hour after that. And there's certain, we guarantee that you'll get certain products, but we can't guarantee results because we may not find much. Just sometimes there just isn't anything. Some houses just don't have any. So, but we will do our best. And on our website we have things like, well, if you're researching people, we have the Civil War pensions, which are helpful if you're researching for a certain person. We have the marriage license index, which can be very helpful, and you can click on and you can see the dates and stuff. If you want to see the actual marriage license, you have to come into the museum. So we have the Harvey County blog, The Voices of Harvey County, where I have put a lot of the stuff that I've researched. If I've researched a house or a building down Main Street, I've put it on The Voices of Harvey County. So that's available there for people to read, and that'll be a jumping off point for you to research further. So that's kind of what I had. I'm open to questions. Maybe you have a secret tip you want to give.
Bear down on the mic.
I'm sorry.
Really bear down on that mic.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Test.
Nope.
Test.
Nope.
Still nothing. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Yeah, is the microfilm still available at the library? Because I went right after it opened and they didn't have them.
So the question was, is the microfilm still available with the library? Is the microfilm still available with the library?
I guess that I don't know. I make the assumption. I should try and call them and tell them.
And they referred me to
Oh, okay.
the site. But once again,
Yeah.
it's just the convenience of knowing.
Yeah, no, I know they're much more convenient. I understand that.
So the library referred you to the Historical Society?
Because they have those.
Yeah, we do. We have all the earliest ones for sure. And we're ordering, we didn't have we had gaps in the 60s. And I think we have most of the 70s and into the 80s. So, I mean, we're trying.
And are they?
It's not cheap.
And are they online?
And the second half of the question was, are they online?
No, the only things that are online is what's on newspaper.com, and it goes up to 1922. What I have found, though, is sometimes if you look in other newspapers, like the Hutch News, recently I found an article about a new event on the Hutch News from 1990. So if you broaden your search a little bit to other newspapers, you might find some information.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't.
Sorry,
what
yeah.
you had there.
Sorry. I'm curious, for those of us who have houses in North Newton that were built before North Newton and Newton became separate civic entities, if there's anything we need to know about what it would take to research those houses before and after that switch.
They did, some of the plat maps, they have a separate thing called the Bethel College area, and there are some houses on there. Like I think the Wheel House, I mean, they do have some buildings on there. I think when you get, so some of the oldest houses I think are are on there. I've never looked for one on the Sandboard maps. I'm not sure. I don't think they're on Sandboard maps.
Okay.
Because that was considered pretty rural. You have to understand, that
Yeah,
was
sure.
rural at that time. That was a good ways away. So, yeah, you might better look with the plat maps, because that's where I found some stuff. Yeah, the newer, if I were looking for a newer, like, you know, I don't know, 50s, 60s, so I would do the directory search first and see if I could figure out who was living there and go about it that route. Just, yeah, it's actually harder, I think it's harder to research things that are closer in, like, from the 50s and 60s than it is to research something from the 1880s. Because there's way more information easily available, I think. Because of, I don't know, privacy and whatever, it's just, and it's not, yeah, like city directories today basically don't exist. So, and they don't tell you anything. I mean, they don't just give you a name and a phone number. So, they're not very helpful. So that's been a change, but yeah. I don't know, you know, if you would come to the museum, we would work harder and try and figure that out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
Well, back to North Newton.
Let me give you this.
Back to North Newton. Son?
Yeah, just gotta bear down.
Hold it
Hold
close.
it real close.
There you go.
I have been able to do research at Harvey County deeds. But yeah, you've got to make the appointment, and there's pretty small slots now. I've been researching since before you had to have appointments, and you know, you're just there forever. And bring a few dollars, because you'll be printing out. Once you figure out the system, you can find things, but there are a lot of tedious things. But that's where I have found good information for North Newton houses.
Yeah, and I will stress, have your legal description with you, because they need that. Otherwise, they can't help you.
With an address?
Yeah, an address, yeah.
Then they'll look it up.
Yeah, and yeah, you can do a deed search there, go way back to the first owner. I mean, it's really kind of fun to do that.
Make lots of appointments.
Yes. And be very friendly to them.
Yes, yes.
Other questions?
Okay, I got another one. Why not? So I'm curious about, beyond just sort of general information about the houses that you've helped with research, what have been some of the outcomes of the most interesting outcomes of the house-based research that you've done in and around Harvey County?
So I mean, I do a lot of just building in general research. Stories of murder that I've found,
All right.
and suicides. And it's like, oh, okay. That's always kind of startling. That's probably been some of the more, I don't want to say interesting because it's sad, but you're not expecting that, you're just expecting that. And when, for me, it's when they change things, or, I mean, like that one, the house on Broadway, when they changed, I mean, I've always known it as with that big wraparound,
Gazebo.
all of that. And then I saw this picture, I said, no, that can't be the same house. And then, yes, it can be, if you look at the roof line and all that kind of stuff. So those kind of changes are always interesting, because what was happening at the time that he was able to do that, you know. And it's interesting in Newton because the building boom was in 1886 roughly, following a little bit. A lot of the houses along West Broadway, First Street, are right around that time period. And then in 1890 there was a crash. So a lot of people lost a lot of money. So we sort of put a damper on some of the stuff for a while. So you see that kind of in the building trends. I mean, you can go around town and you can see when things were good and when things were not so good. Just by when there was a building boom in the style that it is. I mean, in general, I mean, it's not foolproof, but in general. Does that answer the question?
In the slide,
Put it very close, just.
in the slide mentions Gladys Brewer, but I was noticing the landscaping.
Yeah,
See that plant on the corner? What is that, number one? But number two, it just made me curious. I'm wondering how landscaping has evolved over the last 150 years. That's a
it
big.
might be cannons.
Did you hear
Are
the
those
question in the
cannons?
back? You're okay? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, landscape history is very interesting. I've studied a little bit of that, more in relation to farmsteads. But yeah, that's what I mean, read your photograph. The trend towards this perfect green lawn, how did that happen? And what does that mean? There's some very, middle class wanted to look like upper class, so they started having these big lawns that are very well manicured, sort of a status thing. And now we're sort of stuck with it. So, I mean, they didn't used to care so much about how manicured their yard looked. I mean, they just mowed it or whatever. Right? So, I mean, those kind of things are interesting, and you can see those in pictures. And it's fun to, yeah, there's people that study that extensively.
Last chance.
Okay, I got one. Another one.
Please, number three, the number three. Three questions from this gentleman.
So first of all, I wonder, I don't know how focus works in old pictures like that, but I wonder if that plant in the corner is actually in the foreground, like closer to us.
Yeah, I think so.
Because then you can see
Yeah.
the shrub goes.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that's number one. Number two, thinking about Ray's talk coming up here in just a few minutes, I'm curious about the kind of racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic divides or abundance or versus lack of information that you find in your research when you're thinking about Newton and North Newton, Harvey County history with regards to land ownership, house ownership, records, that sort of thing. Do you see those kinds of divides and how do those manifest?
Yes, you do see those divides very clearly, especially with the Mexican American family, which Ray might talk about, I don't know. In the city directories, often they're just mentioned as Mexican camps. There's no individual listings of people. That's one way. I mean, the black community definitely had its own section. It was like West 4th Street there, where the post office is now, and that was the part of Newton that was then urban renewal came, and they tore out all the black businesses that were there, and decimated that area for urban renewal. That kind of thing. There's covenants for some of the I don't know what you call it, areas in Newton that still have on their books that you won't sell to a black person. There's at least one. They claim it's not enforced, but go ahead.
Yeah, I've also seen record of that,
I have two.
specifically written,
I have a copy of it.
where it says not to be sold to a Mexican.
Yeah, I have a copy of that. Those things still exist. I mean, it's why you have kind of pockets of where the black folks lived and pockets of where the Mexican Americans lived and where the white people lived. And why when I was doing the tour for the city on pocket tours, there are no Mexican American or black businesses on Main Street until, Cuellar. What was his first name?
Russ Cuellar.
Russ Cuellar had his sewing business on Main Street in the 800 block. He was the first Mexican American to have a business on Main Street. And that was not that long ago. So to try and find out, you have to go off Main Street, you have to go into the other areas of town to find their businesses and that kind of thing. And it's interesting to me, they had especially, I don't know as much about the Mexican Americans, all they had to Ray, but the Black community had a very almost a mirror society to the white community. There were women's clubs that were just like the ladies' reading circle. I mean, it was like I said, it was a mirror society. The two societies, they were running parallel. It's just very interesting to me that, that's how it was. Did that answer the question?
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Last chance. Well, thanks so much for attending, and please thank Chris Smucker for the presentation. Very good.